Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're gonna do a deep dive into my poison build and I'm gonna explain many things. In my previous video I noticed that a lot of people are asking how do you place so many traps at the same time without breaking them. Well, it's all about the infiltrator aspect. I'm gonna be placing an image somewhere in here that it shows the infiltrator aspect. Now for the infiltrator aspect to work, you're gonna need to be in stealth. So how do you go in stealth? You use concealment to go in stealth like I'm about to do. I go in stealth and now you can see that my poison trap here has that little overlay just showing that you can use the trap. That little overlay represents that there's no cooldowns, that you can spam it. Right now above the poison you can see that there is 4 dashes. That represents how many poison traps you can have. So with that being said, I go into concealment and then I can place 1 2 3 4. I can continue placing, but the first one gets replaced by the other one, blah blah blah. But that's how you get the 4 traps placements. Now it's important to know that the moment that you break stealth, so the moment that you get out of concealment, these traps all are gonna activate at the same time. Now with that being said, it's important to also know that the traps are only there to help you kill the monsters, but they're not gonna kill the monsters. They're not gonna do the damage. The poison traps is not your main damage. So just one more example, 3 4 you can see, and I break stealth. I get out of stealth and all of them, you know, break, right? So if you have a big cluster of enemies, elites or anything like that that you think that is gonna be a little bit hard to take on, you go into concealment, you go right there, you drop it, boom, you knock them all down and then you kill them. Now it's important to understand that in the rogue, at least in my experience, it seems that the best scaling abilities for late game are shadow imbuement and poison imbuement and frost imbuement, sorry, cold imbuement, right? Like your imbuement skills are so freaking powerful. So this build also works for shadow imbuement and so on. Obviously for shadow imbuement you can mix in other different aspects and so on, but what I'm trying to say is that the reality is that all your damage comes from these skills. Your imbuments are super powerful. Now why are we taking poison? The poison trap? Well, because it gives us that 30% chance to reset our imbuement skill cooldown, so we can get our imbuement skills up as much as we can. And why am I taking concealment and why do I like to use the infiltrator aspect? Well, exactly because the more traps I have in the ground, the more likely my imbuement skill is gonna reset, right? So a normal strategy to go against a boss, for example, is starting before I even see the boss with my imbuement on. You go behind the boss, you drop all the traps, and then you start attacking it. And then while you're attacking, you're spamming your poison imbuement over and over, so you can apply it as fast as you can, and then you will get those super fast boss kills, right? Now, at the same time, this is a strategy that you use against mainly bosses. The issue with late game on Diablo is that late game enemies are quite powerful. They're very, very powerful, so you're gonna die a lot, especially if you get CC chained. Now, if you're playing hardcore, I would not recommend taking dash, for example, because dash doesn't really get you out of complicated situations. But concealment does. Concealment gets you out of a cheat sheet CC chain because it has those unstoppable. But I highly recommend you to take instead shadow step. So my strategy is that when I start a dungeon, I actually don't take concealment. I usually do this and I take a shadow step and I do the dungeon using shadow step instead of concealment, so I can move fast, go through the dungeon quickly, kill the mobs quickly. I keep my poison trap because, again, I'm mainly using my poison trap to knock down my enemies. Where is my passive? My concussive passive. To knock down my enemies. And because I get all these passives, right? Increase damage, increase poison damage. 15% less damage from poisoned enemies. increase attack speed, blah 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 blah. So this is why I mainly use Poison Trap. Now, once I finish the dungeon, and in that such dungeon there is a boss, then all I do is simply, before the boss fight, I just delete these and activate the Concealment again. And it's that simple. Yeah, you might say, oh, but that's so expensive. Well, after the dungeon, reality is that you're gonna be making your money back, and it's just a little tantrum of mine. Reality is that you don't even need to do this. This build, you don't need Concealment at all, and you don't need the Infiltrator aspect at all, because you're already powerful enough with Twisting Blades and Poison Imbuement. So with all of that being said already, and all this time trying to explain how this works, I apologize. Let's jump into the abilities. So starting with basic skills, I am taking Evaporating Strike because I have an issue with Puncture, and with our glyphs we already have Exploit, so we don't really need that vulnerability that the Puncture gives us anymore. The issue I have with Puncture is that sometimes I want to be in melee range, and I accidentally click on the target and it starts hitting it from like range and like range attacks, and and it's just a little bit frustrating. So I'm taking Evaporating Strike because it gets me that increased energy regeneration, so it's very nice to have it. Then I have a bunch of points on Twisting Blades because it's our main damage. Twisting Blades is definitely what is our main damage. Even after the nerf, it's still very freaking powerful. We take our Symphonic Strikes and our Sturdy passives. And again, here in Agility, we're going to be taking Shadow Step, Enhanced Shadow Step, and Dash, and Enhanced Dash. You can put 2 points in each if you want. Then we're taking the Weapon Mastery passive, and we're taking the Concussive passive, so we can use that Poison Trap to knock down enemies. We are also taking Concealment when you want to, if you want to take it. If you're playing softcore, then yes, it's good to take it. You can have a lot of fun. Like, actually, let's make an example here of whoever is attacking me. Look at this. We're going invisible, and it's a lot of fun to do that, right? But anyway, yeah, we got out of anyway, let's just come over here. Again, Concealment whenever you want to, if you want to. And if you're playing softcore, you're not playing hardcore, for example, then yes, go ahead and take Concealment. It's not an issue. We're taking the traps, and we're going for countering Poison Trap for that 30% chance to reset our Imbuement. We're taking Exploit, and we're taking Malice. Then on our Imbuement skills, we're taking Poison Imbuement. And again, this build is super cool because you can just you can always switch to Shadow Imbuement if you want to even be faster on clearing dungeon, because Poison Imbuement is definitely a very powerful Imbuement, but it's slightly slower than Shadow Imbuement, but it hits harder though. So Shadow Imbuement hits very hard to non-elite mobs, it just blows them up, but Poison Imbuement hits harder to elite mobs. That's something that is true. Then here on our ultimate skills, we're taking Trap Mastery because getting that 12% increased critical strike chance is absolutely huge. And we're also taking Adrenaline Rush. Now, I like my attack speed, so that's why I'm taking Close Quarter Combat. I like my attack speed a lot. Now, you don't have to take Close Quarter Combat. You can go with Exposure, that it gives you that cooldown for your traps. If you're gonna be going for the Concealment and the 4 traps, that's definitely something that you can do. Or you can go for Momentum. Momentum is also very, very, very good. Because when you hit enemies from behind, you get that 20% increased damage reduction and that 30% increased energy regeneration, plus that 15% increased movement speed. That's definitely something very, very useful. And trust me, you will definitely be hitting enemies from the back because of Blade Dancer is gonna be moving around you, right? So with that being said, let's move on to the Paragon board. So I'm gonna pop up my we're gonna look into it in the internet because the Paragon board here, well, I am not level 100, so it's not complete. So let's get over there. So here we are with the Paragon board, and well, I like to take, well, I'm not gonna explain everything, but I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you what I'm taking. So the first glyph that I'm taking is the Efficacy, because it gets that extra imbuement effect, like potency on the enemies is huge. Then our second one, you can either go exploit or you can go for what's the name, combat. Sorry, yeah, combat. I do prefer exploit as a second option because it gets those enemies vulnerable, and we're also taking the exploit weakness Paragon board, because when enemies are vulnerable and they take 1% increased damage from you, up to 15%, right? So it's super good. It just does such a good synergy with exploit. Moving on, you definitely want to take Deadly Ambush, because when you deal 22% increased critical strike damage to enemies affected by your trap skill, so your poison will make even more, like whoever is affected by your poison is gonna do, you're gonna do just so much damage, especially because you even get these rare notes here. The damage to enemies affected by your traps it's just massive, right? And you also get these defensive notes. We're taking combat for that critical strike damage. And we're on our last glyph here, we're gonna be taking tracker, because a poison, every 5 intelligence purchase within range, you deal 10% increased damage to poison targets, right? So I think it's very straightforward, the Paragon board. It makes a lot of sense. Once you start doing it, you start realizing like, oh my god, okay, this makes a lot of sense. We actually have another very good rare glyphs over here that gives us even extra damage to vulnerable enemies. It's just an overall, I think it's a very solid board, and you guys will find it very useful. So yeah, with that being said, we can go into the gear. Again, you guys don't really need to get all these aspects in order or anything like that. You have them on different places, but yeah, we'll be taking the aspect of the protector, aspect of the disobedience, is the defensive aspects. We can take also the aspect of bursting venoms. And again, like I said, you guys, you guys can look at this. It's very straightforward. It's nothing crazy. I feel like I already explained very well how they build, like the build works, and how it plays. But this aspect here on the bottom right, the Infiltrator's aspect, is the one that allows you to go into stealth and drops all the traps. You don't really need it if you're not going to be using Concealment. You can take this right here, which is Shadow Step, Poison Imbuement, Poison Trap, and that's it. And it's going to be more than enough to deal with late game. Poison Imbuement by itself is just so freaking powerful. So if you want to add even more damage using another aspect or anything else, then feel free to do so. You don't really need the Infiltrator aspect, but it is fun to be able to drop the four poison traps. Anyway, so that's how it works. I hope I was able to explain myself as best as I could. Oh, before I finish, I apologize. Very important. This is the most important part. All of these will not work if you don't focus your stats. What I mean by that is the following. So if we look back into the game and we look at our stats, your items is super important to have that vulnerable effects on your aspects, which is the ones that I'm gonna leave on the description below and the comment section below. Everything, I'm gonna leave the link to the build. But very important, you need to have that critical strike chance on your rings. Your rings have to have that critical strike chance. Your gauntlet has to have that critical strike chance, and more importantly, your weapons have to have that vulnerable damage. You can see how my crossbow here has 56% vulnerable damage, critical strike damage with imbued skills. Like, you want to make sure your abilities, your stats, your modifiers on your weapons, even at low level, if you're leveling up level 40, 50, 60, you want to make sure that every time you upgrade to something that makes sense with your build. So my focus and the Paragon's focus is on vulnerable and critical damage. So with that being said, look at my stats. Critical strike chance, I have 40% and without anything. So the moment I drop a trap, how much percentage I get? Boom. I get freaking 12% more. How much does that do? 52% plus 9% from the Imbuement. You see where I'm going? Like, you are stacking all these percentages and you're guaranteeing that damage. So you gotta always remember that no matter the build you do, nothing is gonna work if your stats and your modifiers don't make sense, especially with your Paragon board, right? So look into your items and make sure that you have stacks and stacks of these modifiers. Now that was critical strike chance, right? Then when I do the damage with my critical strike, I am increasing 100. I get critical strike damage 126%, right? Or more importantly, vulnerable damage 265%. That's massive. So yeah, that is my last tip. It's super important that when you look at your stats, you have vulnerable damage. For example, you can see there, I get critical strike damage 24%, vulnerable damage 32%, and then you look on the other side and the same thing, critical strike damage and blah blah blah. And that's what this game is all about. You're constantly looting to get these modifiers, especially in late game. Anyway, Torres signing out. I hope this was helpful. If you find it helpful, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. And also thank you so much for all your support. It's been crazy. We already reached 2,000 subscribers, and just within 2 weeks. It's absolutely out of this world. So again, thank you so very much, and see you in the next one. I hope again this was very helpful, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Bye.